Wow. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Reverend Marianne. It's a delight and a pleasure to be here. I think it's been about a year and a half was the last time I was here, and it just seems so wonderful to be back again. And Sandy, thank you for that beautiful music. Michael Gott, what a great way to kick off this talk today. So I get to close out this month's powerful theme for June, Higher, Deeper Love. And how awesome is it, before we even get into this, that our entire organization, Collective Consciousness, contemplated, prayed, and discussed the topic of love this month. How cool is that? And then this morning, we're kind of dealing with a very timely and timeless statement. Love lifts us up where we belong. I think there was a song actually that was entitled that. And the question today that we're going to contemplate, that has been posed by the Global Themes team at CSL, is how actively are you co-creating a world that reflects this higher, deeper love? Now, there's a powerful question to get us kicked off this morning. How actively are you co-creating a world that reflects higher, deeper love? So this is not a small question, obviously, and perhaps not even a comfortable one. And it's certainly not something that we can answer once and be done with it, right? And for me, it's actually a living question. It's one that asks me to look around my world, look at the world within me, and the world that I'm helping to shape through my consciousness, my choices, and my presence. So our founder, Dr. Ernest Holmes, tells us in the big book that love is the self-givingness of spirit through the desire of life to express itself in terms of creation. Love is the self-givingness of spirit. So love is not passive, according to Dr. Ernest Holmes. It is the very impulse of life moving through us. It is participatory. It is co-creative. And it is not something we wait for. It is something we become. This topic actually brings to mind one of my favorite books written by Rabbi David Cooper, and it's called God is a Verb. In that book, Rabbi Cooper reminds us that God is not a static being, but a dynamic becoming. God is not a noun, but a verb. God is the ongoing unfolding of creation, the continuous movement of consciousness, and the living pulse of the universe expressing itself moment by moment. And according to this mystical view, creation is not something that happened once, as it says in the Bible, right? Or as people often say, it's happening now and always. And we, as human beings, are not observers of this creation. We are active participants. We're not separate from the divine, but we are expressions of divine activity, right? So if God is a verb, then love, the very essence of God, is also a verb. And love is the activity of God moving through us, as us, into the world. So Dr. Holmes also says in the big book that life is not only where we are, it is what we are. It is the whole impulsion of love. So if we go back and say that God is a verb, then love is the way God verbs through us, right? I like to call it God-godding. We are God-godding. Every time we choose love, we align ourselves with this creative force in the universe. Likewise, every time we withhold love, we restrict that force. And every time we act from compassion, we actually expand the field of possibility. Every time we act from fear, we actually narrow it or close it. So you can see, again, we're not passive recipients of a world already made for us that we walk into. We are actually active participants in a world that is continuously unfolding around us. You know, when we look at the world that we currently live in, and if we look very closely, we can see incredible demonstrations of beauty, people helping strangers, community rising up to support one another, breakthroughs in understanding, moments of compassion that can take our breath away. But I know what you're saying. We can also look around and see deep pain, deep brokenness, right? Especially today. Systems that harm, histories that have wounded, and divisions among humans that seem to widen by the day. Boy, it sure feels like that to me anyway. But here's the spiritual truth of that. And I just really want you to be with this, that none of that is evidence of love's absence. Okay? It's actually evidence of where love is needed most. Right? So the world, people, is not asking us to judge it, but the world is asking us, life is asking us to see it clearly, to look at the places where love flows freely and celebrate them, but then to also look at the places where love is blocked and say, this is where my consciousness is needed. This is where my presence matters. This is where love is calling me, as Michael says in his song. This is where love is calling me. So the first step in this is really to see clearly, right? To see both the paradox, the sacred complements. So before we can choose love, we must be willing to witness all of what is without collapsing into one or the other. This is where the heart of radical acceptance, which was a topic that we dealt with a few months ago, radical acceptance, recognizing where love is alive, and at the same time recognizing where it is obstructed, and acknowledging the places where our conscious attention is needed. So then the second step is choosing love, right? Really the deliberate alignment, like we did today, the music, the treatment, the meditation. It's those moments when we shift from fear to love consciously, where we choose contraction. We choose expansion instead of contraction. And we move into connection rather than separation. We embrace connection. That is the conscious decision to participate in the divine activity of love. It is the moment we say to ourselves, and I think it was touched on in the treatment, I will not live in the story of fear. I will choose the story of love. Michael sang about that too, choosing love. So I'm going to illustrate this with a short story of two villages because it really talks about the metaphysics of consciousness and the difference that choosing love makes in a very profound and simple way. Maybe you've heard it before, but there were once two villages that were separated by a wide, slow-moving river. And from the distance, the two villages looked almost identical. The land on both sides was lush and fertile, and the same warm sun rose over each morning, and the same rain nourished their fields. And the river carried the same clear water to both shores. So when people approached, they assumed the two villages, very closely next to each other, they obviously must share the same spirit, the same rhythm, the same way of life. But when you got a little closer, you actually discovered that the two villages live in completely different worlds. So on the eastern side of the river the village was brimming with warmth and vitality, and people greeted one another by name, and children played in the streets, their laughter echoing through the simple, well-kept homes. Neighbors shared meals, celebrate births, mourn losses, support one another through every season of life. When someone was sick, meals were prepared. When someone's roof needed repaired, hands showed up before they were even asked. And the elders in the village were honored. They were cherished, and they were sought out for their wisdom. And there was a real palpable sense of belonging here. Each person was held in a web of care, and the village was alive with quiet, steady joy. However, across the river on the western side, it was an entirely different situation. Though the land was just as fertile, the homes were worn and in disrepair. People kept their doors closed and their eyes lowered. Their conversations were short, guarded, laced with suspicion. Not many children played out in the street. They stayed close to home. Elders felt forgotten, their wisdom unasked for, their presence went unnoticed. And when someone struggled, few came to help. Not because the villagers were unkind, just because they were afraid. Afraid of not being enough, not being taken, of being taken advantage of being disappointed, of not being seen. And the air felt very heavy in that village. And one day a traveler who had visited both villages sat down in the coffee shop with a wise elder from the eastern side. And that traveler was very perplexed and said, I don't understand. These two villages share the same river, the same land, the same weather. They have the same opportunities, the same resources, and yet one village flourishes while the other suffers. How can this be? I don't understand. So the elder smiled quite gently. She'd heard the questions many times before. Because one village believes they are connected and the other believes they are alone. And the traveler kind of sat back and frowned a little bit and said, but they live on the same river. How can they not be connected? How can they not feel that? And she smiled again and said, yes, but they do not live in the same consciousness. The traveler kind of leaned back a little, a bit stunned. Consciousness? How could consciousness make such a difference? So the elder's eyes softened and she says very slowly, because consciousness determines interpretation. Interpretation determines behavior. Behavior determines relationship. And relationship determines reality. One village interprets life through the lens of love, and the other through the lens of fear. So while they may be very close together, they actually live in two very different worlds. The traveler sat back and looked across the water at the two villages with new eyes. And he realized, much like the elder had pointed out, that the difference between them was not fate. It was not luck. It was not circumstance, but it was consciousness and conscious choices. And he, for the first time, understood that the world we experience is not simply the world we are given, but it is the world we co-create through the lens that we share, that we see through. So I have one other story, a quick one, and that aligns with our last step, which is love as action. So how do we translate this from seeing, from understanding, and then into action? So at one time, there was a woman who shared that she had a neighbor that she barely knew, an older man who lived alone and rarely came outside. She would see him occasionally around, always with his head down, kind of shuffling, always moving quickly back indoors. Then one winter, after a heavy snow, she noticed that his walkway hadn't been cleared. And then without thinking much about it, she grabbed her shovel and she decided to go clear it for him. And the next morning, when she came out, she found a small note taped to her front door. And it said in scrawled handwriting, "Thank you. I didn't think anyone saw me." And that simple act of love, unasked for, unannounced, unsolicited, opened something up in him. And over the weeks that followed, he began to wave when he saw her. And then he began to smile. And then one day in the summer, he brought her a small bag of tomatoes from her garden, from his garden, rather. And she later learned that he had been deeply lonely, convinced that he didn't matter to anyone. But that one act of love, that one demonstration, shoveling his walkway, shifted his entire sense of belonging. She changed one moment for one person. She didn't change the world. She didn't change the neighborhood. Just one moment for one person. And that moment changed everything for him and for everyone else in his world. This is the power of love as a verb. Loved lifts us up where we belong by reminding us that we belong to each other. So we're not here to spiritually bypass the world by any imagination with all the things that are going on, but we are here and we are being asked to spiritually engage with it. And again, coming back around to my beloved Dr. Holmes, he writes that God is love, and love can have no desire other than to bless all alike. Love can have no desire other than to bless all alike. So if love desires us to bless all alike, then our work as religious scientists is to align our consciousness with that universal impulse. This means we don't turn away from injustice. Far from it. We actually meet it with love. And we don't ignore suffering that's going on in the world. We bring our compassion to it. And we don't deny the complexity of the world, but we bring our presence to it. We don't turn away. We don't wait for someone else to fix the world. We participate in its healing by bringing and being the presence. This is the world that we are called to co-create. So then we arrive at that last step, that action, right? This is where love does become the verb, like it said in the story. This is where we shift from what's wrong with the world into what is mine to do. Not everything, not fixing the whole planet, not carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders, just what is mine to do here and now. And as African-American activist and writer Adrienne Mary Brown tells us that what we practice at the small scale sets the pattern for the whole system. Or as we like to say in our teaching, so in the micro, so in the macro. Every act of love becomes a seed of the world we are building. So this means that every conversation is a chance to practice love. Every disagreement is a chance to practice love. Every boundary, every act of justice, every moment of compassion, once again, is the chance to practice love. And in doing that, we're not waiting for a better world, right? We're building it, choice by choice, breath by breath, moment by moment. And so as I bring this to an end, what I would like to do, as you move into the week ahead, I want to offer you a few simple but powerful practices to help you anchor this higher, deeper love in your daily life. And coming back to that quote, these are not grand gestures or dramatic spiritual feats. They are small, steady openings, ways of choosing love in the ordinary moments, because it's in those moments that consciousness is shaped and reshaped. So I don't know if you have a pen and a piece of paper, just maybe write these down or jot these down and see if you can start, even if you just integrate one of them into your week, it'll make all the difference. So first, I want to invite you to practice something we call conscious noticing. So at least once every day, just pause long enough to ask yourself, what story am I living in right now? Is it the story of love? Or is it the story of fear? What story am I living in right now? And don't judge it, okay? Don't judge it. I know that's hard, but don't judge it. Just notice it, okay? Because awareness itself begins to shift the inner landscape. So when you catch yourself in the story of fear, scarcity, defensiveness, self-protection, whatever it might be, right? Just gently notice it and invite yourself back into love. Because every single breath of softening can change the tone of every moment that follows thereafter. And in doing that, I'd also like you to choose, the second one would be to choose a relationship or an interaction and bless it intentionally. So this might mean someone you love deeply, someone you struggle with, or even someone that you barely know. So basically you're doing your conscious noticing, and before you speak to them or even think about them, just pause and say gently to yourself, may I meet you with love. May I meet you with love. And let that intention soften your tone with them, open your heart, and guide your present engagement in that relationship. And this is how love becomes structural, right? Not sentimental, not emotional. This is how we actually start shifting the relational field. And then the third practice is something I like to call micro generosity. So each day, if you can, just offer one act of love with no expectation of return. Hold the door for someone, send a kind message. All right, here's the hard one. Let someone merge in front of you in traffic. Speak gently to yourself, please. Speak gently to yourself, even if it's just for a few minutes. Just speak gently to yourself. I promise you, these tiny gentle gestures ripple out into the world in ways we cannot see. And they become the threads that weave a world that is rooted in connection and love rather than separation. And then our last practice, which I hope we're all practicing now anyway, is really gratitude. Ending your day, each day with gratitude. But gratitude, for the small things, the subtle things, not the big things. The way you notice that the light falls across your kitchen counter. The unexpected shift and change and ease of a moment. Perhaps the breath that helped you reset. The conversation that softened something inside of you, that sort of shifted things for you. Because gratitude shifts your inner climate, and it trains your heart to recognize the presence of love in even just the smallest places. And again, coming back to our quote, these practices are simple and they seem small, but they are not. What they are, and they become the ways we choose the Eastern village over the Western village. They are the ways we participate in the unfolding of the divine in us, as us, and through us. And they are the ways we become the change we wish to see in the world. And they are the ways that love lifts us again and again into the world where we truly are creating a world that works for everyone. So today I invite you to remember that love is not something we find. It is something we reveal. It is not something we wait for. It is something that we choose consciously over and over and over again. It is not something outside of us. It is the truth of who we are. And when we live from that truth, when we embody that truth, when we co-create from that truth, we lift ourselves and each other and the world up. So I just want you to I want to invite you right now to just affirm with me, and you can sort of do it silently, or you're all on mute. You can say it out loud. I am consciously co-creating a higher, deeper love in the world. I'm going to say that again. I am consciously co-creating a higher, deeper love in the world. I am a living expression of the divine love. I am a living expression of the divine love. And so now I'm just going to ask you to come together in this one moment as I close out this. And I'm just going to do a quick treatment as I speak my word. For there is only one life, one power, one presence, one love. It is the love that breathes galaxies into being. It is the love that beats every heart on this screen and across the world. It is the love that lives and moves and has its being as each one of us. And I know that this love is the truth of who I am. It is the truth of who we are. And I know that this love lifts us, guides us, and expresses through us and as us. And I know that as each person here is a radiant center of divine love, co-creating a world that reflects compassion and justice and unity and peace. And as I know that truth for myself, I know that for all of us here. And I know that we can hold that knowing for folks who don't even know that for themselves. And I just bless this community. I bless this teaching. I bless this moment. And I bless the world that we are building together. And so it is.